In this chapter, we're going to talk about some of the most eagerly anticipated CSS3 features of any module: transforms and transitions. The syntax behind these can get a bit complicated, especially at this stage of their support. However, their core functionality is actually pretty simple. Transforms allow us to rotate, scale, and offset our elements, while transitions allow us to animate element states, including transforms. Now, we'll talk about transitions in a moment, but first, I want to discuss transforms. There are two types of transforms in CSS3, 2D and 3D. Three-dimensional transforms extend the 2D specification, but rely heavily on it. For that reason, we'll focus on the 2D transforms, which allow transforms over the X and Y axis first, and cover 3D, which adds the Z axis a little later on. Now first, a word about syntax. In this overview, I'm going to cover 2D transform syntax using the default specification syntax. You'll notice, however, that when we do the example files a little bit later, we'll be using the WebKit vendor prefix. This is because support for transforms and transitions is still in the early stage, and of this recording, WebKit is a little ahead in its implementation of the 2D and 3D specification. As always, I recommend checking out the specification for yourself to keep up with the latest developments. Okay, so with that out of the way, what is a transform? Well, if you're a graphic designer, I'm betting you've been doing them manually for some time now. If you're not, the concepts are pretty easy to grasp. Essentially, transforms allow us to scale, skew, rotate, or translate an element, which is just another way of saying offset it. Now, let's explore how this process works. To transform an object, you use the transform property. This transform property can accept a list of transform functions. The functions are calculated by the browser, and the transformation is applied. So what are the transform functions? Well, we have rotate, scale, skew, and translate. As you can see, several of the functions have variations that either limit the transform to an X or Y axis or allows you to pass both axis values. Now, rotate is a little different as it allows a single degree value. There is one other transform function you can pass in. There's a transform matrix that allows you to pass matrix values which can take the place of all the other transform functions. Now, space and an unfortunate lack of math skills prevent me from going too deep into the matrix here, but if you're really interested, you can check out the SVG specification and see how a transform matrix is calculated. You can finally answer the question, what is the matrix? Now, there's one more really handy thing that you can do to affect your transforms. You can set the transform origin property to change the origin of an element's transformation. And what does that mean? Well, by default, transforms are applied with a center origin. If you were to scale or rotate an element, for example, it would scale or rotate from the center of the object. You can use keywords to set the horizontal and vertical origins to the top, bottom, center, right, and left, or you can use percentages to set horizontal and vertical values. 0 and 0 would set the origin in the top left. 50 and 50 would set it dead center, and 100, 100 would place the origin at the bottom right. This gives you an amazing amount of control over your transforms and is something we'll experiment with a little later on. As I mentioned earlier, transforms don't enjoy widespread support just yet, although they are more common in the mobile environment where many apps take advantage of 2D and 3D transforms as part of their interface. And currently, 2D transforms are supported in Safari, Chrome, Firefox, and Opera, but only through the use of vendor prefixes. Be sure to research each of the vendor prefixes before using them, as there might be slight differences in implementation. If you're interested in a pretty neat tool to help with your visual transforms, I recommend John Alsup's CSS Sandbox. It allows you to play around with various transform functions and origins to see how your transforms are going to perform. It even generates the code for you that you can use in your site, so that's pretty cool. So now that we got the basics down, let's start exploring what we can do with transforms, and we'll start in our very next movie.